Welcome. Today, I would like to discuss one interesting question from the analytic mythology. Our main question is the following: why do geographically or historically unrelated cultures share similar myths? How can we answer to this question? Human societies across the world and across millennia tell strikingly similar stories. For example, we can find similar motifs in the mythology. It can be related to the Great Flood. It can be related to the dying and rising god. We can name a heroic journey. Another motif can be associated with cosmic dualism, for example, light versus darkness. We can also find creation from chaos. Another kind of element can be associated with the sacred mountains, world trees, underworld journey, and so on. These similarities are so strong that they raise the philosophical question: why do independent cultures produce overlapping mythic structures? And there can be several explanations for this question. Below are the main explanations. The first explanation can be related to the cognitive universals. It is mind-based explanation and rooted in cognitive science and philosophy of mind. Okay, what can we say about these cognitive universals? What do we mean by this term? Human brains have similar structures, constraints, and biases. Therefore, they tend to generate similar symbolic patterns. For example, we can name shared cognitive architecture. In this context, it can be related to our perceptual and conceptual systems, and we can say that such kind of systems are universal. It can be related to the agency detection, pattern seeking, intuitive dualism. For example, mind cannot be identical with the body. It can be our intuitive dualistic vision. And we can also find in this context intuitive teleology. In other words, things must have a purpose. And as a result, we can see that such kind of shared cognitive architecture can produce, for example, gods as exaggerated agents, or creation stories as a teleological thinking, or it can produce afterlife as the intuitive dualistic vision. Second element inside the shared cognitive architecture the second element inside the cognitive universals, we can distinguish cognitive optimality fact. I mean that cognitive optimality of certain narrative forms and such kind of mythic forms are more memorable and more transmissible. What do I mean in this context? It can be related to the battles of order versus chaos, of hero's journey, such as goals, trials, transformation, and morally charged narratives. Such kind of elements can be related to some mythic forms. As I said before, they are more memorable and more transmissible. And let's go back to our main question, our main explanation. We have said that our first explanation is cognitive universals, and the alternative to this explanation can be evolutionary explanation. If to be exact, it is evolutionary anthropological explanation. And it is related to the shared survival problems which led to shared symbolic solutions. Okay, and across societies we can find human humans face death. Across societies, we can find several essential similarities, such as humans face death, fear natural disasters, need social cohesion, need to explain origins, need moral rules, and so on. And in this context, myths encode functional responses, such as flood myth can be memory of catastrophic local events. Sacrifice myth can be related to the regulating scarcity, hierarchy, and storm gods can be identical to the explaining dangerous weather. Trickster can be associated with the boundary testing and social critique. And our another explanation can be related to the archetypal explanation. You can name this explanation as the Jungian archetypal explanation. It is not mystical but psychological and can be related to the Jungian archetypes, as you can guess from the name. And what are the archetypes? In a simple way, we can say that they are evolved psychological patterns. For example, mother, hero, shadow, wise old man, Triska, and so on. All of them are the archetypes, and you can read all of them in the Jungian psychoanalysis, collective psychoanalysis. Okay. These emerge spontaneously because they reflect deep patterns of human experience. Yet another explanation to the similarities in the mythological motifs can be related to the historical diffusion. Here we can distinguish cultural contact, but we must remember that not all similarities are independent. Some are due to trade routes, migrations, conquest, religious syncretism, and so on. For example, Indo-European myth spread wildly, of Near Eastern myth influenced Greek, Hebrew, Islamic traditions. Silk Road circulated Buddhist, Iranian, and Hellenistic motifs. However, diffusion cannot explain all similarities, only some of them. Okay, and another explanation. For me, it is the most important explanation. It is a philosophical explanation. What do I mean here? I want to say that analytic philosophy of concepts, metaphysics, and explanations can be found in analytical mythology if we want to analyze mythology in an analytical way. And we can distinguish several aspects of this philosophical explanation. For example, the first aspect can be a similar myth from the conceptual necessity. I want to say that some concepts occur in a reflective culture. For example, it can be associated with the explanation of origin, explanation of evil, meaning of death, source of moral order, and so on. And these are necessary philosophical questions. And in this context, we can say that a myth is an early form of metaphysics. In other words, it can serve as a proto-philosophy. For example, it can be related to the ontology, what exists, with the main question, what exists. It can be related to cosmology, with the main question, how does the world work? It can be related to the anthropology, with the basic question, what is human nature? Or we can distinguish here ethics with its basic question, how should we live? Since human philosophical problems are universal, the mythic solutions also converge. And another aspect of philosophical explanation can be associated with the semantic convergence. Even with different languages, human referential needs converge. For example, something created the world, something governs order, something threatens order, and so on. Thus, the semantic roles are similar even when the content differs. Okay, that's all for today's discussion. Thank you for watching. If you have got any questions, you can address me on the comments section below the podcast. Okay, thank you.